was Cup of Excellence created to start to separate out specialty coffee from conventional coffee, commercial coffee, and to create that opportunity for trade?
It was actually so. I don't think we really looked at it in those black and white terms.
Oh, wow.
I think what we said was, we know there are coffees out there that are just phenomenal that we don't know exist. They're being blended away. They're
Wow.
getting to the exporter, they're being blended away. We need to find a way for farmers to showcase what they can do. And so even in Brazil, the first couple of years, we saw coffees win the competition that people didn't know existed, that were from regions that they didn't think they could produce anything above okay commercial. And all of a sudden, these coffees, these small farmers in these areas that were considered, oh, the coffees aren't that good, they are hard, they get, fermented, overly fermented. They would come into the competition, and the cuppers, and at this point, people were interested in coming down and being on the international jury, and they would taste these coffees, and I remember distinctly hearing, and this is when I knew this program had legs. I heard distinctly, "What country are we in?"
Initiating direct trade and making it work at a small or medium-sized scale is hard, especially ahead of harvest. Arkena Coffee Marketplace connects roasters directly with smallholder farmers in Ethiopia and builds in the hard parts: integrated QC, logistics support, and producer-led transparency. Ethiopia's harvest is underway and samples will be ready in February. We know we're early, but that's the point. With coffee supply as volatile as it has been in 2025, getting in now helps you understand timelines and can assist in planning your 2026 buying with confidence, even if you've never bought direct before. The minimum is around 20 bags, and Arkena can pull multiple roasters to meet the MOQ, so you can participate without overcommitting. If you're curious, listen to our recent conversation on the podcast with founder Matthew Thornton, then explore the marketplace via the link in our show notes. You can also book a meeting with Matthew and he'll walk you through requesting samples, the order process, pulled orders, QC, and shipping once coffees are ready. Supporting our advertisers is a great way to support our mission at Mapper Forward to build responsible businesses with responsible pricing models. Check the show notes for details and explore Arkena Coffee Marketplace today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series on the podcast. And we are privileged to have Susie Spindler, the co-founder of Cup of Excellence and the founder of ACE, on the podcast for the first time. Susie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
It is a series that has been a long time coming. I've been aware of the Susie Spindler for a very long time. And a couple of people this year have said, you've got to have Susie Spindler on the podcast. And so we're finally here, and I'm really glad that we do get the opportunity to have this discussion. In this series, folks, we're going to be talking about the impact of COE on the coffee industry. If you hear me say COE throughout this whole series, I am referring to Cup of Excellence, just for reference. Susie, as the co-founder of Cup of Excellence, in this series, we're going to be talking about why Cup of Excellence came to exist. It is a really fascinating story and journey, and this podcast exists kind of twofold: to talk about what's happening in the industry now, but also to document the history of our industry for, people 100 years from now that are going to be looking back and saying, where was business at back then? And so we can't do that without having your voice as a part of the documentation of our industry. So can you tell people what Cup of Excellence is and what ACE is? And then we're going to talk about how it came into existence.
It's pretty simple. Cup of Excellence is what they call the Coffee Olympics, let's say. It is a competition program in a coffee producing country that allows any farmer anywhere of any size to put a coffee into a competition process and have it cupped over and over and over again. And then the best of those coffees go through and win what is called Cup of Excellence. Those coffee lots, which are, actually sitting in a bonded warehouse, are then offered for sale at the auction, which happens about 6 weeks later. And the roasters, the global roasters, or even some of the internal roasters in coffee producing countries buy those coffees at a significant premium. And the farmers then get the vast majority of the money. And so the simple process of well, it's not simple, actually. The competition process and the auction have actually created a whole new infrastructure for specialty coffee. And that's a simple answer of what they are. The Alliance for Coffee Excellence is a trade association. It has membership. The Cup of Excellence program, along with its education, is a 501c3 charity nonprofit.
Which is different from a trade nonprofit.
A trade nonprofit, and this is simply in the United States. So I'm telling you from the complicated standpoint of the nonprofit world in the United States, a C6 would be very similar to what the Specialty Coffee Association is. It is an organization that benefits all parties. So the marketplace benefits, the farmer benefits, all of the industry benefits. That's the kind of the short definition of a C6. A C3 is the nonprofit charity which benefits one side. So the Cup of Excellence benefits farmers. It benefits coffee producing countries, even though it does benefit the roasters because we are finding those coffees. It is categorized because of its educational programs to be a nonprofit charity. So your donations are tax deductible and all of that stuff for Cup of Excellence, and your membership is a business expense for ACE. So in the rest of the world, a nonprofit is a nonprofit. There's not these massively weird categories that the US seems to do.
Why did Cup of Excellence happen? Why do we need it?
Cup of Excellence it wasn't really planned out. It came out of the end of another project where we were trying to create programs to help 5 different coffee producing countries receive higher premiums for their quality. This was called the Gourmet Project. It was I think it started in 1997, which seems like 5 lifetimes
the
ago.
1900s.
Yes, I know. Many people in the industry were not even born then. It's like, whoa, how old am I? But it started then, and it was 5 coffee producing countries, 3, Papua New Guinea, 3 in Africa, and then Brazil. And as we went through the project, I was the North American marketing consultant, and there were several different consultants that dealt mainly with quality improvements. And this is where George Howell comes in.
Shout out to George.
George was the quality consultant for Brazil. Brazil was one of the partners. The interesting thing about the Gourmet Project, and then I'll explain a little bit about Cup of Excellence, but throughout history, we've had all kinds of government funding into coffee producing countries to help them increase production, to help them increase quality, to look at different varieties, to do all kinds of things. This was the first project that actually tied the money to the producing countries to a marketplace component, meaning that if you want to increase production and you want to increase quality, you need the roasters and the importers
You've got to find buyers.
To buy in on that. And so this is what was really strange about this. And it was the first one. Now there is marketplace components, but it was the very first one. And George, being the quality consultant of Brazil, was helping along with the Brazil Specialty Coffee Association, Silvio, Marcelo, some of the guys there, helping smaller farmers, and these were mostly smaller farmers, and helping farmers understand what they had to do to increase their quality. George brought samples to the US, and most of the people that he talked to said, yeah, this is great. We love it, but it's a fluke that Brazil cannot produce high quality coffee. Zippo, no, cannot do it.
Really?
Really, that was, yes, that was, Brazil was below the sea. There were no Brazil premiums at that point.
Okay.
So as we went forward into the program, we said, maybe, there were a few of us. SCAA was a partner in the project, Don Holly. And, there were several. There was people in Europe, people in Japan. Hidetaka Hayashi was in Japan building that whole side of
Infrastructure.
specialty.
Yeah.
And so we all got together and said, well, let's just bring some cuppers in. Let's bring in some of these industry skeptics and let them choose which ones they thought are good or better or whatever. And so it was an experiment. We called it Best of Brazil. Several farmers put their copies in. The interesting thing was we then decided what are we going to do? How are we going to sell these? How are we going to, you cannot take thank you, congratulations, you won a competition. You can't take that to grocery stores. You can't take that to the bank. So we thought, well, let's just auction them off to the highest bidder. Well, how are we going to do that? Really? This is just as eBay was starting. We're talking back in the internet dinosaur ages. So Don Holly and I and George got together and in this conversation, well, let's just have an internet auction. Well, oh yeah, right. Right. But what happened is SCAA said, well, look, we've got a webmaster. Why don't you meet with Malcolm Stone and see if you can create an auction? So we asked the farmers to lock up their lots in a warehouse, and we would sell them later after we sent samples out. And all of them looked at us like we had lost our frickin' minds. There is no way I'm not going to sell that coffee yesterday, right? So we had to go back to the ICO and say, can you loan the program like $35,000 so that we can buy these coffees at market and then hold them and then sell them at the auction, and hopefully we'll have a premium and we'll pay you back. ICO had never done that. The ITC had never done that. They'd never been paid back, right? It was like, we don't have a mechanism to be paid back. So
wow,
they loaned us the money, which was, they don't do that, but they did. I guess they thought this is going to be really fascinating. So they loaned us the money and we went to Malcolm. We ended up with 10, we went to Lavras, if you ever saw the cupping room, all the windows were open. There was smoke everywhere. It was just hilarious. Now it's so
controlled.
It's so controlled, but it was just such an experiment. And the cuppers went down. They picked the top 10, and we auctioned them off later on. This is Best of Brazil. We called it. It wasn't Cup of Excellence, didn't exist then. It was just Best of Brazil. And it was a 3-day auction, right? And so each lot closed on its own. It wasn't like it is now. And I think the top lot was something like $2 a pound or something like that.
Wow.
2 O's. And it broke all the records. And everybody went, oh my gosh, look at this. Look at all these copies that sold for such a high price. I'm sitting there going, yeah, wow. Well, as is typical of government projects, just as you get to the point of success, it goes away.
They shut it down.
Right? The money runs out, you shut it down. It's like, oh man, we were so like, oh no, I think this has legs. And it was like, nope, sorry, no more money, sorry. So the Brazil Specialty Coffee Association said, we want to do this again. We're going to find the funding to do it. So they went ahead and did the second one in 2000. on their own, and they hired George and I. George became pretty much what would be now the head judge, which was
Mhm.
what he was at the beginning one. He set a lot of the standards for what the competition needed to accomplish. And then Silvio, who is a Brazil expert, then stepped in, and we did it again. And same thing with SCAA, and it was just so, and it worked. And so then it was, magazine articles, all of the articles, everything. Oh my gosh, look at this. And then Guatemala said, well, wait a minute. If Brazil can do it, we can do it. And so it was at that point that we started looking at, well, what should be the stand? I mean, it was then 2 countries. So it wasn't just working with BSCA, it was working with Anna Cafe as well. And it was at that point, and the first Anna Cafe competition, that George decided that he wanted a different cupping form, a different way to score these coffees. And part of it was what we had learned from the Brazil competitions and how we would then go forward to make the competition and the scoring really, really focus on the farmer's work. Really focus on whether those coffees were perfectly harvested, whether they really pulled forth some of the microclimate, some of the terroir, all of that stuff. And George created a form, dropped it on the international jury in Guatemala, and you can well imagine that it was like this massive uproar, and it was the beginning of
I'm
the cupping
shocked.
form wars. It's like, oh, really? But it does a lot of things. In hindsight, if you look at it, it's very, very, very much rewarding coffees that are perfectly balanced, that are perfectly sweet, the acidity isn't overwhelming, the body is balanced. And George didn't feel like the cupping forms up until that time were actually fair to coffees or were actually really getting at this kind of sweetness that we wanted. And I think that it had a lot, I think there was a lot of influence from Mr. Hayashi out of Japan when he talked about something called sensitive acidity. And we talked about how that works with the palate, how that works with sweetness. I think that influenced George, but George was very much, George, he's very, very much into looking at the definition and the description of high quality in almost not just coffee, but he does it, wine and other things. So this is what happened in Guatemala. And then after Guatemala, this is when we created the logo for Cup of Excellence and the name. And Brazil actually owned it. They paid to have it trademarked. They
Those
paid to
pesky
have it protected.
Brazilians.
Yes. And they licensed it to Guatemala. And then when Nicaragua in 2002 came on board and said, we'd really like to try this, there were a group of us that got together and said, we need to standardize this program. We need to make sure that it's neutral, it's fair, it's apolitical, it has the same rules for every country, so one country doesn't get a favored position over another one. And so that's when we decided to create the Alliance for Coffee Excellence. And I became a completely non-paid, I got $1 executive director and filed all the paperwork and created the Alliance for Coffee Excellence, which actually at that time owned Cup of Excellence. So that's how it kind of started. And from there, it just spread. And we've, tweaked the competition protocols. We've added extra security measures, added safety, added quality parameters. But the concept is still the same. Allow all the farmers that don't get a chance to showcase their coffees have a neutral body to cup them blindly with an auditor to make sure it's fair, and let them just shine, and then give the marketplace the opportunity to really experience these coffees and to find these farmers. I mean, that was really the idea behind it. And that's really how it's gone forward. It's hard to keep that very simple mission when you've got politics and when you've got everything, but that's how it all started.
That was actually where I want to take the next question was like, was Cup of Excellence created to start to separate out specialty coffee from conventional coffee, commercial coffee, and to create that opportunity for trade?
It was actually so. I don't think we really looked at it in those black and white terms.
Oh, wow.
I think what we said was, we know there are coffees out there that are just phenomenal that we don't know exist. They're being blended away. They're, they're getting to the exporter. They're being blended away. We need to find a way for farmers to showcase what they can do. And so even in Brazil, the first couple of years, we saw coffees win the competition that people didn't know existed, that were from regions that they didn't think they could produce anything above okay commercial. And all of a sudden, these coffees, these small farmers in these areas that were considered, oh, the coffees aren't that good, they are hard, they get, fermented, overly fermented. They would come into the competition, and the cuppers, and at this point, people were interested in coming down and being on the international jury, and they would taste these coffees. And I remember distinctly hearing, and this is when I knew this program had legs, I heard distinctly, "What country are we in?" And I thought, oh my gosh. And I'd been in coffee for years before that and had dealt with, and I thought, you don't know the first thing about what's actually possible. So part of Cup of Excellence, in my mind, and I think in a lot of the guys' minds that were instrumental in starting it, is what is really possible here? What can we really accomplish? I don't know that we set out to say, okay, we're going to define commercial and we're going to define specialty. That was left up to SCAA. We were just not, that was not our mission. Our mission was to literally discover unknown farmers and unknown coffees, and then have a mechanism for the roasters and the importers to not only buy that coffee, but know who they are. So the transparency back to the farmer was critical. And at that time period, there was no transparency back to the farmer. You could go to the exporter pretty much, and that was it. And so by building that transparency, listing the farmer, having the jury meet them when they were down there, it created the situation where there could be long-term trade between a farmer and a roaster. That's why as Cup of Excellence started getting into more and more and more countries, and this transparent infrastructure was being built, it became a standard where whether you had a Cup of Excellence country or whether you were a Cup of Excellence country or whether there was a competition, specialty roasters could demand to know who the farmer was. And before that, there was not a possibility to ever ask that question.
I love it. Join us for the next episode, folks, because now that we understand the origin of where Cup of Excellence came from and why it happened, now we want to start to understand the impacts that it has at origin. So join us for the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.